Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me. I have notes on my phone, so because I realized after I made notes, because the subject is so big that I didn't want to overwhelm everybody, that I made notes, but then I realized, or I remembered, I don't have a printer at home. So, okay, so here we are. So yes, my name is Anne Mulhall. I'm from the Domestic Violence Resource Center of South County. You know, it's a nice short name. We're located in Wakefield on Main Street, next to the CVS on the Four Corners there on Main Street. And I wanted to, the reason I come to speak to people is just to mostly make people aware. We have Domestic Violence Awareness Month is next month, October. So I'd like to be able to reach out to just plant some seeds and make people more aware of what's out there. So I heard this recently. Hurt people hurt people. I heard it the other day. We had a seminar up in Warwick, and a gentleman from PC mentioned it, and it just stuck with me ever since. Whenever I say I work at a domestic violence agency, I hear a variety of things. So that's great work that you're doing with those people. I have a friend who went through that. Hey, let me ask you something. Why doesn't she, usually they mean she, why doesn't she just leave? And while that seems like a valid question on the surface, it's not so simple. I think that if it were that simple, he or she would leave. Nobody goes on a first date, gets insulted or whatever else, and then thinks, oh, I hope he calls me. You know, it usually goes pretty well, and that's part of the trickery. We all know that domestic violence is the result of someone needing and then having power and control over another person. And that's really the eye of the storm, no pun. Power and control is what domestic violence is, and the form it takes is what we end up seeing or hearing. What we hear from a victim is kind of like what you'd hear from an addict, say. There's an addiction to get back to that first date, the great part, the charmer, the caring person, the funny one, the one who my friends and family love. And that's what they're always reaching for that first time around. So the victim of domestic violence ends up questioning his or her own actions and decisions, and it's a very psychological circle about how it works, because they were sucked in at the beginning and thought, oh, this is a great person, and you know. So I had dated a guy years ago, and while it wasn't a domestic violence per se, the thing that kind of opened my eyes is that we were, you know, we'd go out, and he was a white guy, but he had an issue with interracial partnering. Doesn't have to be marriage, but dating or anything. And it was always like an issue. It was always like, ugh. So we'd be out or watch a movie or anything that would come up. And if that kind of a subject came up, it would just be on a loop. It would just be hearing it all the time. So I started to compartmentalize and started to figure out, like, well, I'm not going to talk to that person, or we're not going to go to that movie, or let's shut that TV show off. And I thought I had it all under control, and it went on for like a year that I was dating this guy, and I was in the car one day, and a black artist came on the radio, and I said, oh geez, I'm just going to shut this off because I don't want to have to deal with it. Except the difference was he wasn't in the car with me. So I had noticed that my behavior started to change outside of that. So I thought when I had it all under control, I really didn't, because it was starting to get into my head, if you will. So when I magnify that to think of a domestic violence situation, that this person who's in this situation, who, you know, we love this person, and this person is treating me in a certain way or saying certain things, and then they start to say, well, even the way that some things are said where, you know, you meet somebody and they say, oh, you don't want to mess around with me, I'm bad news, and oh, you can't, that's not true, whatever, and you start dating, and then they kind of hearken back to that and say, well, I warned you, I told you. So then it becomes the victim's issue. And so it just starts to break down how you think about yourself, how you think about the situation. So when somebody says, why doesn't she just leave? There's all that other stuff going on. It's not as easy as, oh, let me open up the door and just leave, because it's that easy. I'm just, again, planting seeds and making sure. But if we start to think about the word, personally, domestic violence, the words domestic violence it bothers me personally because it's so much bigger than that. Violence, of course, we think of as being physical, but domestic violence is, it manifests itself in many ways, psychological or emotional, financial. People have control over someone else's finances so they physically can't leave. And again, it just starts with power and control and then expands out to there. But if we think about the word violence and replace it with violate, it makes a little bit of sense. They're violating personal space, they're violating my emotional thought, they're violating my finances, anything. So I think for me, that's how I end up seeing it. It makes more sense to me and people can understand it. But it does manifest itself into a physical abuse, of course. There's sexual, there's financial, there's emotional, verbal, and psychological as one grouping. And then digital, that's sort of how we break it down when it comes to care. The digital, which is fun, because a lot of times now teens are dealing with that because they're on social media or they have a cell phone and they're getting texts 30 times and they compare it to love because my boyfriend's texting me when they don't really have anything to compare it to and they don't realize that that's actually stalking. And or when he gives or she gives him a phone and says this is just our phone, it's really a tracking device. You know, it could be. And I know this is in my notes somewhere and I'm probably going to jump all over the place, which is why I have notes. But that makes me think of when, you know, we did a talk like this at Prout High School. We actually did a 2-day little workshop with them about teen dating violence specifically. And the things that I think about are the things that I always like to try to mention is that what we say when we're talking from the Domestic Violence Agency is not to scare people or to make them suddenly start distrusting people. It really is just an awareness of checking in with yourself and saying, this thing that he or she just said is not making me feel right. Let me just check in. And I always sort of joke about this with the kids, is that my husband will say, how about Chinese, when really I want Italian, and I could go, oh, is he trying to get me to have Chinese? That's crazy. And then you go, wait a minute. I just check in and go, oh, it's just about Chinese food. Okay. but you know, it's a moment of, you know, it's that I try to make a light of it, but to say, if things are being said and that you check in and it is okay with you, oh, okay, but just check in. And that goes for bystanders as well, as you are seeing a family or a friend kind of go through stuff. Oh, see, there it is. I'm jumping all over the place. Let me go through my notes. Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's the teen thing I said. So I'm going to go back for a second and just say that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men in the U.S. have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime. So whenever you're in a room and you think about those statistics, they can be kind of high. And I think it's like 1 in 10 teens have experienced teen dating violence of any kind. Teen dating violate, as I like to try to clarify. So what are the warning signs? Well, first, in my opinion, we have to start listening with a different ear. We have to start hearing differently. So I had taken a DV 101 class when I first started working at the agency, and they had a woman there who was a survivor, and a story that she told among many, but the one that stuck with me was where her boyfriend would tickle her, but tickle her to even when she said stop, stop, enough, and he would tickle her to the point where she would feel ill, just laughing too hard or whatever it is. But imagine being the bystander in that conversation. So she doesn't feel right about that. Something about it is bothering her. So she says, well, and the friend says, what does he do? And she says, well, he tickles me. Huh? So where do you go? So instead of saying, well, it's just tickling, the idea of listening differently might be, why are you asking? Why is that an issue? Why are we having this conversation? Or how does that make you feel? Or things like that. So, that's on you. That's sort of your own conversation with your friend, but that's what I mean by hearing differently. There's a reason that the friend is bringing it up as an uncomfortable thing. It's not on the surface tickling. So, excuse me, some of the signs when you are a bystander, some of the signs might, but certainly not all of them, might be a verbal attack where somebody is being, we're in a conversation, having a dinner party, and a husband or a wife is constantly on the other one for, that was a stupid idea. Why would you even say that? That's dumb. Why would you, how come this food is such and such? It's little things like that that you then become aware of, that he does that or she does that all the time. That's, disrespecting or isolation. I'm not going to be able to go to the thing because so-and-so wants me home or whatever. Again, just starting to pay attention. There's a woman who, in my mind, is a rock star. Her name is Susan Still. Next year is our 40th anniversary at the agency, which is amazing all by itself. But we're getting her to be our guest speaker. And she's from upstate New York, and she was on the Oprah show when I first saw her about 10 years ago. And at that time, she had just come out of a relationship that she had. She was married for 17 years, and very long story short, her ex-husband had her son, who was 8 at the time, videotape some of these beatings. And her boss started keeping track of them. Well, the difference was, in legal, the videotape alone was going to give him maybe a year in jail. The tracking by her boss, because it was second witness keeping track, and it was a calendar, 36 years in prison. The longest of anything in the US. So that's the difference about being a bystander. It's that your points of view and your awareness matters. And I'm also, by the way, not saying that a healthy relationship doesn't go through bouts and anger and all of that stuff. That's not, you know, that would be weird in Stepford if you didn't do that. So that would be its own weirdness, right? I'm suggesting, however, that should something not feel right, that, again, we just check in. Okay, I said that part. So, deciding what your comfort level is about getting involved. Certainly not suggesting you hear a fight going on in the next apartment and you knock on that door. No one's asking you to put yourself in harm's way. Sometimes, as a bystander, as a friend, just being available is enough, and that's pretty challenging. I heard this phrase the other day by that same guy. He said, we have to hear them into speech. So I have a problem with going, oh, I know what you mean. Oh, I know. I already know the answer. That's my own issue. So I kept that hear them into speech, because truly it is just listening. Because a person who is getting ready to reach out to you for a situation like this has already gone through so much that by the time they reach out, they're kind of ready, or they're dropping tidbits to kind of test the water. It's a very I can't think of the word I want, tenuous maybe. Statistically, a person leaves a situation like that 7 times before it sticks. So, and that's not 7 times in a row. That could be 7 times over a year, 7 times over 2 years, 10 years. So when you get that call and you're thinking to yourself, and I know you will because I did and I work in the industry, here we go. She's just going to go back. She's just going to go back. Yeah, she might. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be the person who picks up that phone and listens and helps and just, again, listens. It's kind of easy and it's kind of challenging. You know, you're not expected to, build a new house or anything. But you consider their side of this, like I said about reaching out. They've been isolated. They've been already told that they're no good. No one's going to want to help them. They're an idiot for trying, and whatever other story has been planted in their brain. It's embarrassing to reach out. It's humiliating, and sometimes it's just dangerous. I don't know the exact statistic, but I think it's something like the first 3 weeks of leaving is the most dangerous. So what's next? So what can you do? And I think you have to crack open your creative brain. I saw this thing on the news. Well, to be honest, it wasn't the news. I don't have TV, but I watched it on YouTube or something, and it was a news story, and it was about a kid. He was probably about 17. I think he was definitely under 18, and they made a big deal about that. But he was a big kid. And he was on a public transit train or bus or something, and he recognized the situation as maybe being DV. So he, for whatever reason, he just went over to them and he asked, he had a map or whatever, and could you help me get to? And the people he interrupted them and then just sat with them for the whole ride. Then when he got to the end of the ride, he found a police officer and pointed out what he had been doing. And that was magical to me because that was within his wheelhouse. It was something he felt comfortable doing as opposed to, hey, stop doing that to that lady. He just diffuse the energy. So what is yours? Like, what is that? I don't know what mine is. Mine's different every time because one of the reasons they don't allow me to answer the helpline is that I'm always like, where are you? I'll come get you. That's not really right. That's not really right. I will be the person like driving over the border with somebody in the back seat. It's probably not a good idea. That's why I couldn't foster parent either because I wouldn't give them back. Okay, that's another story. So I mentored instead. I knew my own wheelhouse. Police officers have their own stories as well, and because on the surface it seems strange to them or anybody who's watching that a person calls the police arrive, they take away the perpetrator, and the victim is saying, why are you taking my husband away, or why are you, and they're yelling too, and you think, what is happening right now? But what they know, and I'm, again, not saying any of this is set in stone for any particular thing, but she knows that in a couple of hours he could be released. So if she doesn't stick up for him in the moment, by the time he comes back, she's getting it again. So in the moment, for show, she needs to be able to do that. She needs to be able to fight for him. And I fought for you, remember? Did you see that? So whatever it is, it's all about survival. Yeah, she's just trying to survive. So back to what you can do. It's, again, about your comfort level. And as I mentioned, most of you have to be there for the person who's reaching out. And you can't force any issue because we have no idea how layered the situation is, forcing the issue like I would. I'll come get you. Where are you right now? You know, that, no. The patience will be your challenge, as it is mine anyway. There's a woman who, again, I learned about this in the DV 101 class, who she had been dating a guy, living together, but they weren't married. They had no kids. They didn't even own the house together. And certainly people on the outside are going, why doesn't she just leave? There isn't even any ties there. What's that about? And, you know, after a number of years, the advocate who was telling the story said that the woman had called her and said, I'm ready to leave. And so they made a safety plan and they got the whole thing together. And as it turns out, he had been threatening her mom. If you think this is bad, wait till you see what I do to your mom if you leave me. Well, once mom was in a nursing care and she was safe, now the woman said, I'm ready to go, because he can't get at her. Now she was ready to go. So on the surface, it seems one thing, and you know, behind the closed doors, of course, it's another. I mentioned a safety plan. I'm going to be leaving these books as Peace at Home. Safety planning is a big deal because you can prepare, or assisting with preparing things like, did you make a copy of your license? You know, did you make a copy of all your important papers? Give me $10 a week and I'll start a bank account for you. You know, whatever it might be, because, you know, whatever. I don't even want to give you ideas because they're all so different. Merriam-Webster defines revolution as, 1, a sudden, radical, or complete change, a fundamental change in political organization, especially the overthrow of one government or ruler and the substitution of another, activity or movement designed to affect fundamental changes in the socio-economic situation, or a fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something. I'm asking you today to start a revolution, a big revolution in many small acts and baby steps even, a revolution to peace. You being here today and listening to me talk can be the beginning of this revolution, and I challenge you to a revolt. I've left some booklets. I'm leaving these booklets here for you. We have a website. We have a newsletter. I have an email. You should get involved on our website, which I designed, so don't judge. We have a sign up to get that newsletter. It's a monthly emailed newsletter, and you can always unsubscribe if it's information. It's all different. Sometimes I put funny things in there. Sometimes it's about our fundraisers. Sometimes it's the statistics or a local story. It's all different. We have a volunteer training that's coming up September 23rd. It'll probably be at our agency in Wakefield, but it's free. There's lunch. It's 6 hours. Once that's under your belt, you can kind of come back around and decide if you want to volunteer or when you can volunteer. The volunteers that we need first usually are the helpline volunteers. We ask them to be available 4 hours a week, like a 9 to 1 or a 1 to 4 type of thing. The rest of them are kind of on call. Sometimes we have, we have a safe home, so sometimes the residential director will have to take a mom to whatever, DCYF or, government agencies. So we'll ask for a babysitter, and so volunteers would do that. Sometimes it's just stuffing envelopes. I do the tabling and stuff, at farmers markets or where nobody ever comes up to the table. They're like, oh, domestic violence, hi. Cucumbers, like they don't want to come to my table. So I try to have candy and stuff. But anyway, tabling at health fairs and things like that. Special events, anything, any kind of volunteering. But that training, we ask everybody to take the training because we consider volunteers to be ambassadors. So while they're out there, instead of going, I don't really know what they do, now they will know, regardless of what you decide to do. We have a candlelight vigil coming up September 10th. It'll be at Wilcox Park right here. So I'll get some flyers down here and people can take them if you can to post them in your local places. That'd be awesome. Our agency itself, we provide free services to clients. We have a drop-in center, as I said, in Wakefield. Johnny Cake down here in Westerly, we have had, as of last November, we have a staff member there on Monday afternoons and Wednesday mornings. That information, by the way, is all on the website, so you don't have to write anything down or remember it. But she's down here is the point, because we had to come to Westerly because you guys never come to us. So we came down here, and we have a support group here too, and Johnny Cake on Thursdays. And we have support groups up in Wakefield. We have court advocates that kind of take you through all of the steps. So, you know, everything is pretty hand-holding, which is awesome. We have a law enforcement advocate, and she works with the Charlestown and Westerly Police Department. So she might be somebody who will literally be at your house with the police and help that victim go through the steps and what's next and this and that, because as you probably know, there's no thinking clearly. And of course, we have the Safe Home. We are here when they need us. Friends and family can drop in as well and make a phone call to ask, what do I do? What can I do for my friend, my daughter, my whoever? So, for peace at home, let's start a revolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I bring my, oh no, I guess it's done.